We are less than 18 days away from Utah's big kickoff down in Gainesville versus the Gators. But how are the Utes trying to acclimate and prepare for that brutal Florida humidity?
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Locked On Utes podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. My name is JT Wistrcill, former student intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And joining us, as he does every week, is Cole Bagley of FanNation AllUtes. Cole, appreciate you stopping by today. And the big thing from yesterday's practice was we got to hear from the defensive side of the ball, a couple of the players, and of course, defensive coordinator Morgan Scalley as well. And what's been made a lot of this week is just how the team has been trying to acclimate and prepare for the brutal heat down in Florida. Because it gets hot in Utah, right? It's 99 degrees a lot of these days out here. But I mean, in Florida, when you talk about that humidity, it's constantly over 100. It's just really brutal. And it's a different animal when you're trying to prepare for it. And it's really tough to simulate it, even when you are practicing in an indoor facility. But I think it's still important this team is taking the right steps and approaching it that way, because it's going to be tough. And even though those game energy and juices will be flowing, when that fourth quarter hits, it's more than likely Utah's going to have a couple of guys cramping up just because they're not used to playing in that heat and humidity. But I do think it's smart of the coaching staff to try to simulate it by practicing in the indoor facility. And I do think it is going to help them at least a little bit when they go down to Gainesville. And it's as close as they can at least get to preparing for what's going to be. Even though I do think it's worth mentioning, kickoff is at 7 their time. So even though it's going to be hot for the first quarter, by the end of the game, I think by then it will have cooled off a decent amount and it won't be too much of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's different down there. I mean, just looking at the current weather as of right now, it's 89 degrees with 63% humidity, and it's supposed to get up to 94 with 75% humidity. But as of right now, it feels like 99 degrees. So yeah, it feels 10 degrees hotter because of that humidity. Yeah, it's funny. Being up there yesterday, they after practice was done, they walked us over to the side of the indoor facility, which they closed all the doors. They've got the humidifiers pretty much going in there, and they've cranked the heat up a little bit. So they're trying to simulate, Florida as much as possible, because it is a different, it's a different setting. It's a different place. It's going, Scalley talked about, it's going to change, what does it do to your breathing? What does it do in terms of how you, need to make sure that you remain hydrated, right? You're sweating a lot more. And so you need to make sure that you're drinking more water. So they're just trying to simulate it like they do with, crowd noise. If you go up to a practice and, you're there and they're simulating crowd noise, you're going to hear on the loudspeaker, cheers or boos. And it's kind of funny, but, it makes sense. They're trying to get these guys acclimated to what the setting is going to be like. And I'm for it. You do as much as you can to make sure that they're ready to go. And for a lot of these guys, it might be the first time that they ever experience humidity. And it's definitely a different feel. And I'm sure playing football in it is a different feel. To your point, yeah, I mean, kickoff is late at night and the sun won't be a factor, and it should cool off, but it'll still be humid, and they're still going to have to learn how to deal with that. But it was just funny because, like I said, they took us to the side door. It's a garage type door, so they pull it up, and it's almost like all this steam comes out, and then all these freshmen walk out and they go, "Oh man, it feels so cool out here," as it's literally 95 degrees outside. But I'm sure it was a lot hotter. And then a couple coaches follow behind, and they're dripping in sweat head to toe, and the players come out, and I shook a couple of their hands and look at their jerseys a little closer, and it's like, you guys are soaked in sweat. So kind of funny, but it makes sense. You do what you can to be as prepared as possible, and it's necessary. So good on Utah on making sure that their boys are ready to go.
Yeah, it is something that seems kind of strange, as you talked about, just the whole thing of practicing indoor and trying to simulate it. And you've seen Florida fans even on social media being like, you can't simulate it. And it's like, well, you can't perfectly simulate it, but there's things you can do to get close enough to it and just make it a little bit more difficult. And that's the nice thing with practicing in the indoors, you touched on, is the sun's not really going to be out for most of the game. It'll be down by the time the second half is going on for sure. I'm not a Florida weather expert like you, Cole, so I don't know what time the sun sets over there, but
maybe even first quarter. I mean, kick
yeah,
is at 7, I believe, and if you're just judging it based off when the sun goes down here, depending on how high the seats go up in that stadium, you might not see much of it at all. So
true.
the sun, to me, the sun's not really a factor. I think the first quarter you might have it, bearing down on you a tiny bit, but after that, it's like it should be down behind the stadium, and at that point, you're just playing under the lights, but the humidity is there. But to Florida, to respond to kind of the nonsense that Florida's saying, you can't simulate what it's like to play against Utah's offense or defense perfectly right now either. So making a comment about the humidity, it's just stupid. They're probably getting closer to simulating the humidity than you are simulating what it's like to defend against Cam Rising and Tavion Thomas. So just kind of a dumb comment to make.
100, no, I 100% agree. How about guard and tight ends like Brant Keithy and Dalton Kincaid? There's not, your scout guys can do as good a job as they can, but they're not going to simulate those guys perfectly. So it's going to be fun. And you mentioned with the speakers blaring as well. I think that's a big thing too, because that is going to be a loud environment. Billy Napier's first game as head coach of the Florida Gators. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out. But another thing I thought was interesting, we heard from Coach Scalley talk about in yesterday's press conference was just talking about how the defense just needs to do a better job communicating a little bit. You got a new guys in there. Devin Lloyd's gone. Tafua's gone. You got a lot of leaders along the defense who aren't there anymore. So you can tell new guys are coming in, having to step up, learning the signals and having to communicate. So it sounds like the energy is there, but they just need to do a better job communicating a little bit more. And as some of these guys, or whether it's one of the veterans in Diabate getting more comfortable and stepping into that role, I feel like it's not that big of a concern because we still have a few weeks to go and they can still iron the communication side of things out. But how are you feeling hearing that they still need to work on communicating better on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, Scally said one of the first questions was, hey, how was Saturday scrimmage? And he said, it was decent. The energy was really good. The guys were flying around, but the communication isn't quite there. And it makes sense. You named a couple of guys. Obviously, Devin Lloyd was one of the most vocal leaders that you've ever seen, and which is especially good because given his position, the linebackers, they are, they're almost the quarterbacks to the defense. I think along with the safeties, those are the two most important positions to be communicating because they can pretty much see everything, right? And they can see behind that the defensive line and into the backfield. So you lose a guy like Devin Lloyd, you lose a guy like Mika Tafua had been there for a long time coming off that end, and you lose Vontae Davis in the secondary, and a couple other upperclassmen who came in last year and made a big difference. So it makes sense that the communication isn't quite where it needs to be. But Scally did clarify and say, hey, these last few days have been a lot better. We're seeing things, we're emphasizing things. We're going back and telling them, hey, guys, we need to communicate a little better. And, just consider there's a lot of youth still on, Utah's defense. You've got, like, we say that Karene Reid is an experienced defender, and he is one of the most experienced linebackers, but he's technically, just a sophomore. And, I think he finished in the top 10 in terms of tackles, but he didn't play a ton. He played behind Devin Lloyd and Nephi Sewell. He had a couple starts because, of the situation with Nephi going down with injury there for a minute. But yeah, that's your most experienced guy, is a guy that's a sophomore, a sophomore who, was formerly a walk-on and played behind two of the best linebackers Utah's had in recent years. And so that's your most experienced kind of guy. And personalities kind of come into factor here a little bit. Going back to comments that Scally has had before, or Coach Swan, one of the two, talking about the linebackers, they've said that, Karene Reid is a guy that leads more by example than with his voice. And so I'm sure that there's an emphasis to try to get Karene talking a little bit more. And I've seen him do it. You look out there and you watch him, pointing and mentioning things. And Lander Barton said that he's been great in terms of doing that. But then you have a guy like Andrew Mataafa who's very vocal. So it's a balance. You have personalities. You have guys that aren't as outspoken as others, but then you also have guys that can lead by example. So they just need to perfect that communication. There's, again, like I said, there's a lot of youth on this defense. There's a lot of starters that are just sophomores. guys that were freshmen last season that are now coming into their second year, and they didn't have to be as vocal last year because you had those vocal guys. Now
Mm.
they're trying to, to transition here. Guys like Cole Bishop, Karene Reid, as I already mentioned, some of the guys on the defensive line. It's a learning process, and I'm really not worried about it. They'll figure it out. There's still plenty of time, and it's an emphasis. So the coaches are aware of it, and, they'll fix it.
For sure. And yeah, I think it's one of those things where these guys weren't leaders last year, but thankfully they got the opportunity to see what great leaders look like. And then they can take and apply that as they get more comfortable and confident in the system. And that'll hopefully lead to a big year. And you talked about guys like Karene Reid and some of the linebackers for Utah. We're going to talk about those guys in just a second. But first, want to tell you guys, give you guys a little message from the NHTSA: drive sober or get pulled over. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride, but you think you live nearby, you think you can make it home, you think it's not a big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyways? And even so, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, could even kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. That's from the NHTSA. Thanks again for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. The ultimate college football preview is here if you guys are in the market for a second listen. A 7-episode preview with college experts, local teams, experts, and Odyssey college football insiders. It's everything you need to be ready for the college football season in one spot. Search for the ultimate college football preview on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Once again, that's the ultimate college football preview from the people on the Locked On College Network. So, Cole, we've been kind of breaking down the different positions for this Utah team, and one of the ones with the biggest questions coming into camp is the linebackers, because this team's two leading tacklers from a year ago, Devin Lloyd and Nephi Sewell, are both now respectively in the NFL. So it's kind of been that thing of who's going to be the starters in that first game versus Gainesville. And one of the guys, I want to start with the guy I personally feel the best about, and I know it's a guy that you know very well as well, is Karene Reid. I just think he's a guy, when you look at it, played in 10 games a year ago, had 6 starts as well, 44 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, 2 pass breakups, and interception. He's a guy, went to high school out in Utah as well, and he's just a guy come in, surefire tackler. He's not going to make mistakes, knows how to fill holes. He's physical, and I feel like you talked about, as he gets more comfortable, going to become a better leader as well in communicating, and I feel like he understands how to know what offenses are trying to do, whether that's moving over defensive linemen, trying to make sure they're in the right spots. He has really good vision as well to sniff out if plays are a run or a pass or maybe even an RPO. And he's a guy I trust in coverage as well. We talked about the interception last year. That's an area I think he's going to have an even bigger, in terms of stats going up. I think he's a guy who could have 2 to 3 interceptions this year, because I do think he's stellar in coverage as well. But you know Karene extremely well. What do you think of him as a player, and what kind of season do you think he's in for?
Man, I love Karene. One of my favorite players on the team, just because of who he is on and off the field. He's just the nicest guy. Very. He's not one of these players that you have to show up to media and it's just part of your job, and you kind of just you give okay answers. No, Karene is awesome. He remembers things and he asks you how you're doing and all that kind of stuff. So Karene is just a stellar guy off the field, and then he's a beast on the field. It's almost a night and day difference. You're like, man, how is this guy that's so nice and caring and pays attention to these details about things that you've said before is just nasty on the field. I mean, I think that's the best way to put it. I mean, he's just an all-around great linebacker. And that's what I love so much about his plays. He reminds me somewhat of Devin Lloyd in the fact that he can pretty much do everything, and his IQ is very, very high. We had one of our contributors up there yesterday talking with them, and I was able to listen back to the audio, and she asked him, what do you feel like what's your greatest attribute as a linebacker? And he said, just my IQ, the way that I see the field, my vision. And I would agree with that. You go back and you watch the way that he plays. he does see the field very well. He can almost anticipate plays before they happen. I think that's why, that interception against Washington State really happened. And if you go back and watch that play, he knew what was coming, and he put himself in a situation to make sure that he intercepted the football. So Karene is fantastic. I expect a big season out of him. I think he can be, in the top 5 on the roster and, leading in tackles, potentially, maybe the leading tackler from the linebacker group. I think it's going to be, come down to him and Mohamoud Diabate, potentially Lander Barton. Just depends on how many reps, Lander gets. But I think Karene can lead the room. I think he could be, a leader in tackles on the team. And I think he could definitely, be a leader in terms of takeaways, whether that's interceptions or fumbles. This guy just makes things happen. And I think people are really going to come to know who Karene is more this year. He was he was a walk-on last year. He's playing behind Devin Lloyd. He's kind of playing in Devin's shadow. I think some people, were really impressed with him in certain situations, but it's kind of easy to forget who is playing when, Devin Lloyd is out there. So now that Devin is gone and Karene can really step into the spotlight, I expect a really big season from him. I'm really, really excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, it sounds like he is in for a monster year, and it's always great when those guys who are good guys off the field as well as great players on it are able to find that success. And you mentioned it, Karene Reid is more than likely the surefire, is definitely going to be one of the starters. At least we feel pretty confident in that. And the other one is still up for grabs more, but at the moment, it does seem like since he's come back from injury, Mohamoud Diabate has started to win and take command of that other off-ball linebacker job. And Diabate is an interesting one because he's a guy who played on ball his first 2 years at Florida. First year playing off ball was last year, and now we'll come into this year doing a little bit. I think he'll play on ball some. I think he'll play a little bit off ball. I think mostly he'll play off ball, a little bit on ball as well. I think they'll use him as a rusher a lot, like how Devin Lloyd rushed on a lot of passing downs last year. And he is an athletic freak. So he is able to make those plays and easily get around offensive linemen, especially if the gaps between their splits or the gaps between them in pass protection are too wide. He's someone who has the athleticism to get around and shoot through those quickly before some of the big guys can even get the hands on him. And when you have an athletic chess piece like that, I just think it's going to be fun to see how Coach Scalley, Coach Swan use him to make plays. And I think he is fired up and ready to go about this first game in Gainesville, because it's not like the team showed him the door, but anytime you play your former team, your former anything, you want to win and show them that you're in a better place than you are now. But Cole, what kind of expectations do you have from Mo this season?
Yeah, I think what I'm expecting in terms of starters is Karene and Mo right alongside him. Like you said, I think Karene is going to be that guy that kind of remains in the trenches, maybe drops back a little bit into coverage on plays, is tracking the football. Whereas I see Mo, coming, really rushing. Those are some of the things that he's talked about is getting in on that pass rush. And just given his athletic talent, Coach Swan described him as being able to run like a gazelle. He's got a lot of speed and explosiveness. So I think those two are going to make a great pairing. I do think we'll see quite a bit from the guys behind them, but my expectation is it's those two guys, and that's how they're going to play. You got Mo, coming in on that pass rush, really trying to get into the backfield and attacking, whereas, Karene is kind of tracking the football. He's kind of, laying back in the trenches and then maybe potentially dropping back into that first line of coverage. So that's what I expect from those two. Mo is awesome. Great pickup. It is funny to kind of see the banter, you Florida fans, trashing him, saying that he sucks. And it's like, well, he was the second leading tackler on your team just a season ago. So it's hard for you to say that that he sucks or that he's not very good. I think he's great. And I think he's going to be even better. I think Utah's got a much better defense than Florida, and they've got a much better linebacker development, than Florida does, at least at the current moment. So I expect a good season out of him. His experience is going to pay off. I think communication is going to be big, like we've talked about. But I've been able to have conversations with some of the other linebackers. I've had conversations with Karene and Lander Barton, Justin Medlock, asking me, what's it like to have Mo in the room? And they're just like, it's been fantastic, especially the young guys, because he's like that. Justin Medlock and Lander Barton are just saying, he's teaching me so much. He's, whether it's on the field or it's in the locker room, we've been talking, we've been gelling, and he has helped me to really understand what it takes to to be successful at this level. So he's a great pickup for the U, and he and Karene should be just fantastic in those starting roles.
Yeah, and when you have a guy who's played big time SEC ball like that, I mean, he's played every year since his freshman season. So he does have that experience against some of the best teams in the country that is going to be helpful and useful for the Utes this season. As by the end of the year, they hope to be going against the best teams in the country in the college football playoff. And one of the things that's interesting you talked about with him is we had Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators on a few weeks back, and he talked about, I think one of the reasons a lot of Florida fans weren't too kind for him is it was his, like I mentioned, his first year, honestly, ever playing off-ball linebacker. And that is a huge adjustment. And I feel like he'll be even better going into his second year. And I'll throw this as well. It's better coaching. I really think Coach Swan's been able to work with him. He's one of the best linebacker coaches in the country. And I think because of that, we're going to see a big year. So it is going to be fun to see Mohamoud Diabate and make all those Gator fans eat their words down in the swamp in the next couple of weeks. So those are the two guys. And I agree. I do think it will be the two veterans. Early on, I thought, just all the momentum Lander had going, I really did think he was going to start. But as Diabate's comeback, gotten healthy, it seems like he's reminded everyone, like, hey, I was a starter in the SEC, guys. I know how to play football too. So kind of re-entered himself in this conversation. But there are two really intriguing young guys who are going to play a role this year that I want to talk about. But first, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL right around the corner. You guys know golf, always fun to bet on as well. And of course, college football getting back in the swing of things. If you love the Utes to win the Pac-12, as you more than likely do since you're listening to this show, make sure you guys cash in on that. Look at the other odds and lines from some of their big games this season and see how the Utes are going to do against teams like Florida, even some of the other games down the road. There's going to be lots of opportunities to cash in on what should be a huge season for the Utes. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting scores and podcasts that they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So jumping back in here, we talked about the veterans, as you mentioned. Karene Reid, not really a veteran, but because of how young this group is, the fact that he has playing experience at the college level makes him a veteran. The one guy that Utes fans are really excited about, and I just think long-term, we're going to look back on the transition from Devin Lloyd to Lander Barton as one of the best we've ever seen in Utah history, from going from one great player to the next. But that's a lot when you're a true freshman trying to play, especially when your first game is down in the swamp. But Lander's a guy. His family, of course, has the lineage. His sister, Danny, just got done playing volleyball at the U. We know his brothers were really good on the football team as well. One of them's currently on the Raiders. So this is a guy who comes in with the NFL tutelage, the great athletic bloodlines as well. And he's just a great linebacker. He has phenomenal instincts. He's physical. And I'm excited to see what he's going to do this season, even more so long-term. But what do you think his role will look like in 2022, Cole?
From what I'm hearing, he's probably going to be that third guy. And I think Utah kind of has the policy that the starting positions in most areas are going to be up for grabs each and every week. You got to maintain those. It's not political here. They are going to choose the best guys every week, and so I do think that Karene and Mo will secure those starting positions through the majority of the season. But we'll see. Lander, hearing good things about Lander, and I know Lander fairly well. He actually went to my high school, Brighton High School here in Conwood Heights, and he's a special player. I've seen him play quite a bit. I watched him quite a few times last season, and he's got really good size, and he's got really long reach. He's got these long arms, and he's able to really wrap up well. It's not often that he's missing a tackle or guys are breaking free from him. He wraps up really well. He also, similar to kind of what we talked about with Karene, he's got that high IQ. He's normally around the play. He's not getting lost out there on the defense. Whether he's making the tackle or he's nearby, ready to back guys up in case they can't bring down ball carriers. He just has that really good nose for the football. So Lander's great in terms of really where he's at. I think the only thing that he's lacking right now is just college experience. We talked about it a little bit before, to go from a couple hundred fans, to thousands of fans, especially thousands of booing fans that are going to be, going against Utah here in a few weeks in Gainesville. That's different, playing under the lights, you have so many people that are just, going against you and there's momentum and things like that. It's different. And the noise too, at times, you kind of have to adjust to, making sure you hear what the play call is or, hearing what the scheme is and those kinds of things. So all I'm hearing really is that the experience isn't there, but that's going to come really fast. I
Mhm.
think we're going to see a good amount of reps for Lander this season, even though, I'm anticipating Karene and Mo starting. I think Lander's going to see a good amount every single game, and he's going to learn very, very quickly, which will be very advantageous for him, especially, Mo's a senior. And so, next, if Lander doesn't get a starting spot this year, one is going to open next season, and I'm putting my money down that it's going to be Lander Barton as a starter as a sophomore as well. So a lot of things to be excited about, and it starts now. It starts in a couple weeks. Lander is going to show what he can do, and I have really high expectations for him.
Yeah, I think as all Utah fans do, and when you have a player who is that highly rated, you expect him to come in year one and contribute, and that's exactly what he's going to do. And there is no experience like in-game experience, because the time you make a mistake on something in-game, whether it's you bite too hard on a run fake and then you get beat over the top, and you were supposed to be the one in coverage in that spot making that play, you're not going to make that mistake again, because you don't forget that feeling of letting your teammates down or knowing like, dang, I made a mistake there. So 100% agree with you too that he's just going to get better as the season goes on, and he gets that experience as well. And another guy we expect to get in some action in a little bit is Justin Medlock as well. Cole, I know you know Justin extremely well too, and he's just a guy this coaching staff I know is really fired up about just to get, because you could tell he just loves to hit people. And when you're a linebacker, you're getting physical every single play, basically in a car crash every time. So I think what Justin Medlock is going to bring to this group is going to be fun. And you talked about Lander having a little bit of a role, but it sounds like you think Justin's going to have one as well this season.
Yeah, I think he's going to be that fourth guy. So I think, your second strings are Lander and Justin. I don't know that Justin's going to get as many reps as Lander. We'll see, but I'm hearing great things about Justin Medlock too. I mean, the future of the linebackers is in really good hands. You have two freshmen here that really, when it comes down to it, their biggest weaknesses are they don't have that college experience. They're coming out of high school, but they're going to get it this season. He and Lander are going to have opportunities. They're going to have reps. They're going to see what it's really like, and I expect them to take the college setting by storm and to very quickly show that they are college ready. I mean, that's one of the things that coming into this season, coming into spring, is that people were saying, hey, Justin Medlock is very well prepared to come into the college level. That was kind of the talk around him, and from what I know, he's living up to those expectations. He's flying around, he's making plays. He as well has a high IQ, and he is brutal. This is a guy that finishes tackles really, really hard and wraps up well. So it's exciting. You've got your more veteran, experienced guys in those starting roles, and then you've got these young freshmen that sounds like they're ready to go and they're ready to fulfill that second string. So I expect a good amount of reps for both these kids, and I think Utah fans are going to come to love them very quickly, and which bodes well because they've got plenty of time left in their careers here at the University of Utah.
For sure, and that's stuff we didn't even mention, guys like Andrew Mataafa, Hayden Fury as well. These are other guys who could factor in this year, whether that is just on a limited basis or injuries occur, and they end up having they end up coming in and making plays, kind of like a guy like Karene Reid stepped up, as you mentioned, when Nephi dealt with some injuries as well. So going to be interesting to see what this linebacker corps can do, but led by Coach Swan, we know they're in good hands. And I agree with you, Cole. I expect this group to have a good year. I think it's the biggest thing when people look, Utah lost their best player from last season. Devin Lloyd is gone. And I don't think the best player on this team is going to be a linebacker again, but I think the Utes are still going to get very good linebacker play, as good as pretty much anyone outside of Oregon, I'll say, in the Pac-12, just because you have two guys. When you have a guy like Nephi and Justin Flo, the other Sewell down over in Oregon, that's just hard to beat there. But I feel like guys like Lander, Barton, and Medlock, when you project them out, they have the potential to do something special for how long they're going to be with the program. But Cole, you keep kind of churning out fall camp coverage, and it's winding down a little bit. So what are some of the things you have coming up here soon, shortly?
Yeah, I mean, we're just kind of continuing to cover fall camp, obviously coming to an end. I don't think there's media availability next week, which is both sad and tough. You love being up there, and it's been great to be back up there. And now we'll kind of have a little bit of a break, but we got plenty of interviews that'll carry us over. We'll still have information pumping out. We had a lot of good conversations this last week that will carry over into next week, and then I'm headed out to Gainesville. I'm super excited. I've been I lived out in the South for a while. Lived out north in South Carolina for a time. I've been to Florida before. I've never been to Gainesville. I've never been to an SEC football game. So just really excited to get out there to experience that, to be up in the press box and hopefully witnessing a victory by Utah. I think this first week is going to be very telling to how good this team is. I wrote in a piece last week. I think if Utah wants to go to the college football playoff, it's got to go through Gainesville. It starts day one, and I think that's the biggest determining factor here. Aside from a Pac-12 championship, is if you can start off strong, if you can go into an SEC, opponent's home field and beat them on their own turf, especially if you beat them by a couple possessions and you start off strong, they're in the top 10, and it's only going to go up from here. So if you can, and I like that spot. I think that being at 7 and 8 is perfect because you're in the top 10, you're getting that recognition, but you're not where you want to be. You're not quite in that top 4. So I'm just excited to get things rolling here. We're not too far off. We're about 2.5 weeks out from being in Florida, and I'm just going to sit back, take it all in, and enjoy it, and then try to provide the best coverage that I can. So
it's going to be fun to see this Utah team get it going down there. Make sure you guys follow Cole at Bagley_Cole. Also check out FanNation AllUtes, where they got some sweet apparel, some of the favorite Utes, some of your guys' favorite Utes. If you guys are in the market for a second listen every day, also want to recommend you check out Locked on Pac-12, where local experts, including led by host Spencer McLaughlin, will take you around the conference in under 30 minutes, looking at a lot of season previews right now, about some of the biggest storylines of fall camp around the conference. Make sure you guys check out Locked on Pac-12. Make it your second listen every day. Make sure you guys follow us at Locked on Utes on Twitter, as well as subscribe to the channel. We are so close to 300 and appreciate all of you guys who have made Locked on Utes your first listen every day over these past few weeks. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.